Hello, MBAP 518 students. This is Dr. Jaros with a video explanation for how I graded exam number 2. So let's get to the exam. First of all, question number 1. Regarding the Procter & Gamble Japan case, what are the advantages and disadvantages of trying to more deeply penetrate the SK2 skincare line into Japan? Explain. Well, we say more deeply penetrate because the product is currently being sold in Japan. The advantages of trying to grow more market share in Japan are, first of all, Japan is a vast market. It's the second biggest market for skincare products at the time of the case in the entire world, second only to the USA. And the SK2 line, even though it's very successful, has been a profitable product, only has about 2% to 3% of the overall market. So there's plenty, it's a big market, and there's apparently plenty of room to grow. It's not like there's market saturation there. Second, Japanese users, the women who use this product, are very sophisticated and know the product. They understand how to use the 7-step process, which is unlike women in some of the other countries that are being considered for expansion, such as in China, right? So they'd have to invest a lot less in marketing to educate women how to use the product. And lastly, because they're already selling it there, marketing and production logistics are already in place in Japan. Whereas if they expand to China or Europe or America, they would have to build, marketing and production and supply chain networks. However, there are disadvantages to expanding, more deeply into Japan. And the main one is this. Procter & Gamble Corporate, which of course is located in Cincinnati, has established as a major company strategic initiative the establishment of global brands. They don't want to have brands that are, strictly local in nature anymore. And they've given managers throughout the company, throughout the world, directives to find local products that they believe have, international or global prospects that could be rolled out successfully at a global level. And SK2 is one of these. So if Procter & Gamble were to keep SK2 in Japan, it would go against their 2005 initiative to develop more global products. It might be tactically sound, but it would be strategically a step backwards. Okay, let's look at question number 2. Question number 2. According to the Stopford & Wells International Structural Stages model, what kind of a structure will a fully internationalized firm have? Is this structure likely to be effective? Explain. Well, first of all, a fully internationalized firm is one that is high in foreign product diversity, meaning they're selling a complete line of products in foreign markets, not just one or two. And foreign sales are high as a percentage of total sales. So they're not just making a few dollars overseas in foreign markets, they're making a lot of money. A firm that fits this profile will have what they call a matrix structure, right? A matrix structure. Matrix structure is a structure whereby the firm is organized by both markets and products simultaneously. And so when you map that, you create kind of a grid, that looks like a matrix. Is this structure likely to be effective? No, it is not. It is not. While in theory, it might have some soundness to it, what Stopford & Wells research has shown that in practice it tends to fail. It tends to fail. The major drawbacks is that it's a complicated structure and therefore logistically difficult to implement. Also, because there are dual reporting lines, remember each employee reports to both a product group and an area group, there are confusing lines of communication, and most importantly, authority conflicts and gridlock because you're reporting to managers from two different places. I got answers to this question that kind of went back and forth, saying, well, under some circumstances it tends to fail, but in other circumstances it tends to be successful, and it kind of all depends on how it's implemented. No, the case was clear. I mean, the article is clear. In their research, the matrix was a failure. It just didn't work. And so companies have tried to move on to other kinds of structures. All right, let's look at question number 3. What strengths allowed Matsushita to overtake Philips during the 1950s and 1960s? What aspects of administrative heritage has been problematic for it in more recent years? Explain. Well, back in the 50s and 60s, there was a favorable economic climate for Matsushita. Trade barriers were falling between Japan and other major countries, such as the USA. And so Matsushita was able to implement an export-based strategy. They created a very centralized structure, centralized structure, what we would call, globally linked in question number 4, with production and R&D and other major functions all centralized in Japan, and an export strategy to get their products to markets overseas. And they were able to do this cheaply because production costs were low, because they were centralized, and they didn't encounter high trade barriers. This gave them a big advantage over Philips, because Philips had a multi-domestic structure whereby they had a lot of facilities located in countries throughout the world. So their cost structure was much higher. Than was Matsushita's. So Philips was able to achieve great economies of scale. Matsushita was able to achieve great economies of scale in terms of competing against Philips. Also, it used what was called a copycat R&D model. Basically, Matsushita did not invest a lot in basic R&D. They weren't trying to be innovative. They waited and saw when other companies like Philips developed new ideas, and then they copied them and made cheap knockoffs. So they didn't incur the big, heavy R&D expenses that Philips, who was heavily invested in basic research, were incurring at that time as well. However, lately, the world is turned on Matsushita. Matsushita has faced growing competition in its own backyard from Korean and Chinese competitors. These companies are beating Matsushita at their own game. They have even lower cost structures because wage rates in Korea and especially in China are significantly lower than in Japan. Also, Japan's administrative heritage is holding them back. The centralized structure means that in the face of lower cost competition, they're not entrepreneurial. Their subsidiary managers are used to taking directives and instructions from headquarters. They're not used to thinking for themselves. They're not used to being innovative and coming up with new ideas. That would allow them to respond better locally to what Chinese and Korean competitors are doing strategically and tactically in their regions. So there's kind of a trained incapacity among subsidiary managers. They haven't been hired to be innovative. They haven't been empowered to be innovative and entrepreneurial, and so they haven't been. And then also one other aspect of Matsushita's administrative heritage is holding them back as well. One of the key values that Matsushita has is no layoff policy. They basically made a promise to their workers that, look, if you commit to us, if you work for us and commit to us, we will commit to you. We guarantee you basically, lifetime employment, But that's not a tenable policy anymore. with Korean and Chinese companies paying a lot lower wages, Matsushita needs to lay employees off. They need to cut some staff. But their kind of internal cultural values have made that very difficult, and managers have been unwilling to take those necessary steps. Finally, last but not least, if a firm traditionally has used a Center for Global approach to knowledge management, okay, describe what this entails. What transnational approach to knowledge management should it evolve towards? Describe this transnational approach and explain what the goal would be in adopting it. Well, first of all, the Center for Global approach, okay, is basically an approach that involves, it's based on the idea that the home country knows best, meaning, if we're a U.S. company, then there's this belief that only the USA and headquarters can be a source of good ideas. Our subsidiaries around the world are basically useless in this regard. We can't count on good ideas coming from Brazil or Russia or South Africa or France or any other place that we're doing business. So in the Center for Global approach, research and development is heavily concentrated at headquarters in the home country. And then whatever new ideas or innovations that are developed by headquarters R&D, those are simply dispersed to the subsidiaries for implementation. The subsidiaries are not expected and not empowered to, contribute to the knowledge generation process. They simply accept the ideas or get the ideas from headquarters, and they're told, implement these whether you think they're a good idea or not. Okay. The transnational approach that is affiliated with Center for Global is something called the globally linked approach. Okay. And I asked you in the question to tell me that a lot of people did not tell me, unfortunately did not say, the transnational approach is globally linked. Some of you did, but some of you didn't, and that was something that was expected given the question. All right. Now, in terms of describing the globally linked approach, it was, the answers were considerably better. The globally linked approach is designed to, overcome the flaws of Center for Global. It recognizes that good ideas, innovative ideas that can help the business can come from anywhere. The headquarters doesn't have a monopoly on the smarts and knowledge, right? And so the idea here with globally linked is to empower subsidiaries, okay, to bring them into the process of generating new knowledge, to make them more innovative and entrepreneurial. And that basically means establishing two-way communication in the knowledge generation process. Rather than headquarters simply directing subsidiaries what to do in terms of innovation, okay, now subsidiaries are empowered to be innovative themselves and communicate that back to headquarters in case their new ideas can be dispersed throughout the company, right? So innovation is designed to be a collaborative process. Headquarters R&D isn't excluded from the process, but rather there's this joint process where headquarters R&D works with subsidiary R&D. They work on joint projects to come up with new ideas that can be implemented in each subsidiary and throughout the company. All right, I hope that this video explanation has been helpful to you in terms of understanding the exam grading.